Is Beaujolais Nouveau just a marketing scam, or is it one of the most genius styles of winemaking to introduce new wine drinkers to something that's a little bit more palate friendly? So, the third Thursday of November every year is Beaujolais Nouveau Day, which means it is right about now. And it coincides just in time for Thanksgiving, so you can pick up your bottle of Beaujolais Nouveau and take it to Thanksgiving dinner the next week. But Beaujolais Nouveau is not a new thing. And there's kind of an interesting history behind it. The history of Beaujolais Nouveau impacts winemaking even today across the world, including in America. And so today, to celebrate Beaujolais Nouveau Day, we're going to be cracking open three different bottles that may have potentially been inspired or impacted by Beaujolais Nouveau Day and the marketing around that. But before we open up these bottles, let's dive a bit into the history behind Beaujolais Nouveau. This is the American Wine Rebel Show, where we dive into the history of American wine and uncover American wine's best kept secrets. I'm Meg Siobhan, and I hope you poured yourself a glass of something good because I don't like drinking alone. So, Beaujolais is a region of France. It's on the south side of Burgundy, or the Bourguignon region, and Bourguignon is where we get a lot of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from in France. And Gamay is a grape that originally originated in that area. It's from that area, but there was some bad press around it for a while. There was a king who really didn't like the grape, and so he basically outlawed it. So it found a new home in the Beaujolais region, just to the south of the Bourguignon region. So if we go back to the 1800s, there were winemakers making wine with Gamay and other grapes, and winemaking is hard work. So grapes are typically harvested in the fall, and when you're picking grapes by hand, that's a lot of labor out in the fields. And so they picked the grapes and then they were making the wine, and they wanted something to celebrate the end of harvest season, kind of like a yay, we did it. So they started making wine in what's called the Nouveau-style, which literally translates to new. So new Gamay. You can make any wine in the Nouveau style, but basically it means that when you make the wine, rather than letting it ferment and then age for months before bottling it, you speed up the whole process. So Beaujolais Nouveau and a lot of Nouveau styles typically ferment for under a week, and then they are left in the tanks for only a couple weeks before they're bottled. So the whole process from when you pick the grapes to when it ends up in the bottle is about 6 to 8 weeks, which is really fast for winemaking. But it means you have a bottle that you can open up basically right away to celebrate the end of harvest and celebrate all the work you put into picking the grapes. And so Beaujolais Nouveau originally wasn't intended to be a wine that was going to be sold. It was for the winemakers and the field workers themselves to celebrate after the harvest season. But like many ideas with the right marketing, it can be something successful that can be sold. So in the 1960s, there was a guy by the name of George Duboff. And George Duboff was actually a negociant, which in the Burgundy region and also in Beaujolais is a role where someone will buy up grapes from a lot of different small grape growers. A lot of times winemakers won't grow their own grapes because the land is so fragmented. You can't grow enough grapes yourself to make wine. And so he was a negociant, still is a George Duboff winery today that makes Beaujolais Nouveau. But he had this great idea. He decided that he was going to turn Beaujolais Nouveau into an event in Paris. So he basically had a tagline that he marketed this event with, that he said, Le Beaujolais Nouveau est arrivé. The Beaujolais Nouveau has arrived. And so it was basically a race to Paris for who could produce their Beaujolais the fastest and get it to Paris to be the first on the market. And it was really successful. This marketing campaign blew up in France, but then also around the world. And wine drinkers in the United States got wind of this Beaujolais Nouveau event, and they wanted Beaujolais Nouveau too. So in the 70s and 80s, Beaujolais Nouveau was really popular in America. See, the thing with Beaujolais Nouveau, because it is made to be so young, the whole winemaking process is sped up. This isn't a wine that is meant to age. It's a wine that is meant to be opened literally right after it's bottled. So when it's sold, people can go and buy it off the shelf and drink it right away, which is kind of fun. And along with this, there became more of a tradition. The third Thursday of November was officially named Beaujolais Nouveau Release Day, which meant that these winemakers now could not release their Beaujolais Nouveau until midnight on the third Thursday of November. So there was an official date tied to this. And so it was really popular. And Beaujolais Nouveau is a fresh and fruity wine. So let's take a step back and think about winemaking for a little bit. So, when you make wine and you put it into either a tank or a barrel or even in the bottle to age it, a few things happen. As wine ages, the fresh, fruity, bright flavors turn into more dried fruit flavors or more leathery flavors. And if you think about it, this happens with fruit itself too. If you have an apple that is sitting out and assuming it doesn't go moldy, it'll eventually dry up and turn into a dried apple. And those dried apple flavors taste different than the fresh apple. And the same thing happens in the bottle of wine. The other thing that happens is the tannins inside the wine, the feeling that makes your mouth feel grippy or gritty, that drying effect, start to integrate a bit more into the wine. So when you have wines that are higher in tannin, like Cabernet Sauvignon, as it ages, those grippy, really astringent tannins will become more integrated, and the wine itself will feel softer and just smoother to drink. But Gamay itself is not a highly tannic grape to begin with. And when you speed up the wine process, the tannins, which are in the skins of the grape, don't have a lot of time to have contact with the juice. And so there's just not a lot of tannin. So it doesn't need to age to integrate the tannin. And it's meant to be a really fruity style of wine. So it became really popular. And in the 1990s, some more wine snobs and serious wine drinkers started to criticize the wine because it is this light, fruity, sort of simple, it's not a very complex wine. It got some criticism for just being basic. And so it lost some of its popularity. New wine drinkers maybe became less familiar with it, and those who considered themselves more serious wine drinkers felt like it was not as cool to be drinking anymore. They wanted something a bit more complex. But it's starting to find its own way again. I think we're personally, I'm seeing the pendulum swing back in the way of more light fruity wines being more popular. So I think we might see an uptick in Beaujolais Nouveau again. But one of the cool things is that this style of wine has had an impact on winemaking around the world, including regions of the US. And so in the US, winemakers can't make Beaujolais Nouveau because to be called Beaujolais, it has to come from the Beaujolais region of France. But they can make Gamay because that's the name of the grape, and they can make other styles of wine in the Nouveau style, getting their inspiration from Beaujolais Nouveau. So today I've got three bottles that we're going to be digging into. This first one here, this is from New York. This is from Paul Brady Wine, which just a shout out, Paul Brady has a wine shop in the Hudson Valley in New York, which is just a little bit north of New York City. Very fun wine shop, lots of local wines, but then he also has his own lines of wines as well. So if you happen to be in the area, be sure to check it out. But this right here is Fauxjolais, which of course is a play on words from Beaujolais. And this is not made with Gamay, which makes it super fun. This is made with the Deschonec grape. The Deschonec grape, which is a French-American hybrid, is a lower tannin, sort of more bright fruit grape to begin with, which means that it's similar to Gamay. So makes sense that they would use this for more of a Beaujolais Nouveau style. This wine here is also interesting because when they fermented the grapes, they fermented it with the skins of Gamay grapes. So there's gonna be some of those flavors from the Gamay skins imparted here too. And they used a whole cluster and carbonic maceration in this wine. So those are two winemaking terms. So whole cluster means that rather than just picking the individual grapes, some of the stems from the grapes are thrown into the fermentation tank as well. So that can give it a bit higher tannin because these stems have some tannin in there too, but it also just imparts some different flavors. And then carbonic maceration is one of the most important words in Beaujolais Nouveau style winemaking. So typically, when grapes are being turned into wine, they are crushed And then in red wine, the juice and the skins, the crushed skins, are all tossed into the tank together. The yeast is added and they ferment. But with carbonic maceration, the grapes aren't crushed. So you've got the full grapes sitting in this tank, which means that fermentation actually starts inside of each individual berry. And as that happens, the berries burst. And then that's how the juice kind of leaks out of the burst grapes. But something interesting happens when the fermentation starts inside of the berry because there's not really oxygen inside of there. And there's a compound that is produced in carbonic maceration that is called isomalt acetate. And funny enough, isomalt acetate is the same compound that is used by candy makers when making candy like banana flavored candy. Think like back to your childhood, like banana runts or banana laffy taffy. That's isomalt acetate. So in Beaujolais Nouveau style wine and some other carbonic maceration wines, they actually get a little bit of that banana candy flavor to them, which can be fun. There's different schools of thoughts on this. So some people love it. It's kind of like cotton candy, bubble gummy, banana candy. It's very fun. It's very easy to drink. Other people feel like it's more of a fault, especially when it's in higher levels. They don't love it. But I think for me, it's just up to personal taste. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. It is interesting though. And it definitely is one of those examples of how wine is very much science. So let's break into this Fauxjolais here though and give this one a taste. All right. So the glass is like not even close to my nose right now, and I am already getting some like tart cherry. Smells like really just juicy fruits. Definitely has a very strong nose on it. This one is super fun. So I'm getting those tart cherry notes, cranberry, a little bit of red plum, some apple notes as well, and just a little bit of earthy spice. So this is super delicious. I probably would want this a little bit chilled. So before I finish the rest of the bottle, I'm going to pop it in the fridge for about 20 minutes and then finish it. But it's got a little bit of a fuller body than I was expecting, but the acid on this is so nice, so bright. It's got kind of that Beaujolais Nouveau style to it a little bit. But like Beaujolais Nouveau, this has almost non-existent tannin, which means this is a red wine that's almost drinking more like a white wine. So it has some of those red wine flavors like the cherry and the plum, some other berries in here, but its mouthfeel is more like a white wine. So high acid, it's got no tannin basically. So if you're a white wine lover who's trying to break into red wine, this would be the wine for you. It's super fun. This would go so well with Thanksgiving because it's got those cranberry notes to it. But honestly, this is something you could drink all year round. But now on to our next bottle. So, as I said, in America, winemakers can't be making Beaujolais wine, but they can make wine with the Gamay grape. And Gamay, because it is from the same part of the world as Pinot Noir, it grows well in the same sort of climate. And so it's getting a bit of a resurgence these days in Oregon, which is super exciting. I love the Gamay grape personally, and it can be made in this fresh, fruity, really young style, but it also can be made into more serious wines. And so there's some winemakers playing around with both ends of the spectrum, especially in Oregon in the United States right now. So our next wine is from Oregon. It's from the Willamette Valley, which is known for Pinot Noir, but like I said, we're seeing some Gamay pop up there too, which is really exciting. This one is from Division Wine Company. And this one here is not a Nouveau style. So it was aged for 8 months in stainless steel tanks and then in old French barrels or neutral French barrels. So it's not going to have a lot of oaky notes from the French barrels because like a tea bag, once you steep it a couple times or once you use a barrel a couple times, it kind of loses its flavor. But it was aged in oak, which is typically not the case in anything Nouveau style. And this is from 2022. So, like I said, typically with Nouveau styles, you want to drink them right away. But this one here is a couple years old at this point. And for this wine here, the winemakers chose to produce the wine in a whole cluster carbonic and semi carbonic winemaking technique, but they also did some traditional fermentation. So, where the grapes are destemmed, crushed, and then they're fermented with the juice and the skins mixed together, but not within the full berry. So, it's going to probably have a lot of different layers of flavor in here. And winemakers can do that when they want not just one style, if they want some of the carbonic notes, but they also want some of the more traditional winemaking notes, they'll do a mix like that. So I'm excited to dig into this and see what it tastes like. All right, so this one here, just doing a quick comparison between these two glasses. I didn't mention this before with the Paul Brady, but this glass here is a little bit cloudy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So it is made in a more natural winemaking style, which means not everything is going to be filtered out. Perfectly fine. But this Division One in comparison is clearer. So it is likely more filtered than the Paul Brady one. Just a call out there. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm getting a lot more dark fruits in this compared to the Paul Brady. So this wine here, it's got blackberry, plum, but also has raspberry, a little bit of strawberry in here, which is super interesting, and it also has a lot of spice. So this is a very spicy, fruity wine. The tannin here, there's a little bit of tannin, but definitely not in your face. It is delicious. The tannin and the acid on this balance each other out really nicely. This is more of what I think of as a classic American Gamay. It's still very light, very drinkable, but not that candy-like. There's none of those candy-like notes in here. This is pretty complex for a Gamay actually, which makes it really interesting with those different spice, a little bit of those earth notes, and the red and black fruits all in play here. Still a very light wine. So if you're not a big red wine person, this would still be great. Or if you're more of a Pinot Noir lover, this is drinking similar to a Pinot Noir, a little bit on the lighter, fruitier note, a little bit less of those earthy, mushroomy characteristics that we get in Pinot Noir, but could be a good one to try if you've never had Gamay before. This is a fantastic Gamay. And that brings us to our final wine of today, which is a bit of an Uno reverse card here. So this is also a Gamay. And no, it doesn't look like one. This is a Gamay Blanc. And real quick, we need a sidebar on what Gamay Blanc actually means. So if you notice on the back of the bottle, I think it's so interesting. The back of the bottle actually says Gamay Noir on it, which if you know any French, noir means black. So that is typically what they refer to with red wines, like Pinot Noir, black Pinot, and Blanc is white. So Pinot Blanc is the white version of Pinot Noir. But it gets a bit confusing with Gamay. So Gamay Blanc, going back to history a little bit. So Gamay being from the Beaujolais region of France, near the Bourguignon region, where there's a lot of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. For a while there, they were making Chardonnay that they found in Beaujolais, making it the Chardonnay grape, and they were calling it Gamay Blanc because it kind of looked like Gamay, and they thought maybe it was just the white version of Gamay. It's not, it's just Chardonnay. So sometimes there will be wines that are occasionally still labeled Gamay Blanc and are actually the Chardonnay grape, but that's not what this is here. This is actually made with the Gamay grape itself. It's just made in a white wine style, which is why it ends up looking a bit like a rosé. So this wine is doing it all. So typically with red wine, we already talked about carbonic maceration, where the fermentation starts in the whole berry. But even if it doesn't, the grapes are pressed and then the juice and the skins go into the fermentation tank and fermentation happens. With white wine, similar, the juice and grapes are pressed, but then the juice is put in the fermentation tank by itself and the skins are tossed away. A lot of white wine is made from grapes with white or green skins on them, but some white wine can be made from red grapes as well. You just don't throw the skins in with the wine. So that's what happened here. And that's why it has a little bit of a pink color because, of course, some of those skins are going to impart a little bit of color as they're pressed, but it's not going to have all of the red wine color, which also means it's not going to have a lot of the red wine tannin and structure that you get from the grape skins. So I'm excited to dig into this and see what does Gamay juice taste like on its own without those red wine grape skins. And real quick, this is also from Willamette Valley. So this is from Libertine Wines. And it is an unfiltered wine. So you can see there's some wine crystals in the bottom of the bottle. That's not a bad thing. That's just some tartrates, which happens naturally. It could be some dead yeast cells in here. They're not going to kill you. I would recommend probably not drinking them. But if you do, it's not going to hurt you. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, so this has some white peach, lemon. It has some tropical notes as well, like some pineapple and guava. If I had to compare this to another white wine, I would say it's closest to an unoaked, warmer climate Chardonnay. But this also has some nice acidity and a little bit of salinity to it. And I love that the bottle feels very beachy, but I think this one would be a great Thanksgiving wine as well. It's always interesting to try red wine grapes when they're made into white wines because you do get different notes there without the skins on it. And it can be a really interesting side-by-side comparison. So since we're in fall season now, all three of these would be great Thanksgiving wines, Christmas dinner wines. The best wines to pair with turkey and stuffing and cranberry and sort of all these side dishes are going to be lighter, fruitier red wines or white wines that have some complexity and different notes to them. Chardonnay is a good go-to. This Gamay Blanc here would be a great go-to as well for turkey and all the different side dishes that you're getting. And I love these examples of how the same grape can be made in so many different styles. A Nouveau-style, a more traditional style with longer aging, even a red grape as a white wine. It's a good reminder that a lot of times we put wines into a box and we think, well, this is what this grape tastes like, and this is where it's from, and this is the style it's made in. And that's absolutely not the case. So many different grapes can be made in different locations, in different styles, and it can be fun to try them all. Sample different flavors and different winemaking techniques in different regions for grapes, and you might discover something new that you absolutely love. So let me know in the comments, are you a fan of Gamay? Do you like Beaujolais Nouveau or Nouveau-style wines? And let me know what you're drinking for Thanksgiving. If you liked this conversation, the history of Beaujolais Nouveau and how it relates to Gamay and Nouveau winemaking across the United States today, be sure to hit that subscribe, hit the like button, and follow along because there's a lot more wines that we have yet to discover across the world in the United States. So until next time, cheers!